Now, another important topic that we are going to take today is Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill 2021. This bill is not of 2022. It was introduced in 2021, but we'll be taking it. Why? Because it has been in news. See, it was introduced in December 2021 in Lok Sabha, and it is pending with standing committee. Standing committee, what is standing committee? Standing committee is the committee of the parliament, okay, through which the parliament ensures a check on the government. Okay, it is not the cabinet committee. अब यहाँ पे एक important difference है. Cabinet committees, okay, and parliamentary committees. Okay. Now, what is cabinet committees? Cabinet means government. ठीक है. Parliamentary means parliament. Okay. Now, to understand this difference, and you will remember it throughout your life if you understand it once, because there is a lot of doubt in the students regarding what is what is parliamentary committee, what is cabinet committee. They could get confused all the time. Very simple difference if you understand. Ki cabinet is government. Cabinet is government. And what is parliament? Parliament is government plus opposition. What kind of parliamentary system we have? We have Westminster's parliamentary system. Westminster. Westminster is in Britain. Okay. We are following Britain's parliamentary system, where if this is parliament, the executive is within the parliament. Okay. So this is Westminster system of parliament. Okay. But if we consider in USA, okay, so Congress, US Congress and President, the executive, are separate. They are not one and same. Okay. The executive is different from the parliament or the Congress. But in Westminster system that we are living in, sorry, what happens is executive sits in the parliament and forms a part of the parliament. And the parliament manages a check on the executive through what? Like the parliament exercises a check on the executive through no confidence motion. Okay? Censor and all these kind of things. Okay? Question sessions and all these. So this is the Westminster system. This is the US system of governance, where the Congress and executive, the president is executive. Okay. If you talk about the political executive, so executive in India, PM, political executive, he sits in the parliament, the government sits in the parliament, but the ministers here, okay, the cabinet in US, it does not sit in the Congress. Okay. It is a different body. Congress is a different body. ठीक है. तो यहाँ पे डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन मतलब सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर्स, यहाँ पे पार्लियामेंट एंड एग्जीक्यूटिव आर बोथ इन द वेस्टमिंस्टर सिस्टम. द पार्लियामेंट एक्सरसाइजेस कंट्रोल ओवर द एग्जीक्यूटिव थ्रू ऑल दिस मोशंस एंड सेंसर्स. ठीक है. तो सिमिलरली ओके, तो back to the cabinet committee. Now any committee that is formed by the government itself. ठीक है. तो like currently BJP is the ruling government. BJP is the ruling government. It is having its own cabinet ministers. So a committee formed of cabinet ministers is called cabinet committee. ठीक है. Where all these ministers sit and discuss policy. ठीक है. What kind of policy should be brought. Okay. But what is a parliamentary committee? A parliamentary committee is a committee where ministers are not allowed to sit. Where ministers are not allowed to sit. All other members, a cabinet committee, a parliament committee can contain other member of parliaments who will debate and discuss the policy brought in by the government. This is the fundamental difference between parliamentary committee and the cabinet committee. Now parliamentary committee has standing committee and ad hoc committees. Standing committees, there are like on various issues there are standing committees, and ad hoc committees are, standing committees are like permanent in nature. Okay? And whereas ad hoc committees are formed to take up specific issues. Okay? If the parliament thinks a very specific issue of very important consideration has come up, then it can form an ad hoc committee. Okay? And that committee can scrutinize the specific policy or the decision. But there are some standing committees, like for every kind of ministry there can be a standing committee. I hope you understood the basic difference between parliamentary and parliamentary committees and cabinet committees. Okay, again back to what has happened is कि parliamentary committee cautions against trade in captive elements. So what is happening? There is an act called Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Wildlife Protection Act 1972 governs the governance of the wildlife in India. Protection, preservation, conservation and promotion of wildlife in India. That is governed by Wildlife Protection Act 19 WPA 1972. ठीक है? WPA 1972. Now the government is trying to amend it by bringing in another WPA 2021. Okay, we'll be looking at what are the differences, what are the features and how are both different. But there is a specific clause that see what is the issue. Section 43 of WPA 1972 says that any person who is in possession of a captive animal or a trophy means a hunted animal, shall not transfer it to any other person by a method of commercial transaction. That means if person A is having a specific animal, captive animal, or a hunted animal, like a parts of like elephant teeth is a trophy, है ना? तो ये सारी चीजें. So if a person is having any kind of captive animal or a trophy, so he cannot transfer that to another person used through a transaction which is commercial in nature. That means a captive animal or a trophy cannot be bought or sold. It cannot be traded. Okay? That is section 3 of WPA 1972. But this WPA 2021 bill adds an exception to this section 43 of WPA 1972. It says that this section shall not apply to the transfer or transport of any live elephant by a person having certificate of ownership. Now why this clause? Because a lot of temples in the south, they own elephants, okay? And for a lot of rituals, elephant is required, okay? So what they do, they breed, they sometimes capture, they breed, but elephant is a Schedule 1 animal, okay? So that is the problem. To allow that kind of thing for elephant specifically, a clause has been added, an exception has been made to article section 43 of WPA 1972, and the exemption has been provided for elephants. That means elephants can be captured from the forest and it can be sold outside, okay? But of course under such conditions as may be prescribed by the central government. But this transaction cannot be freely entered into. Of course there will be some oversight, or like of course there will be some monitoring by the central government, but an exception to trade in the trophy or live animal, captive animal has been made in the bill that has been brought. Okay. Now we will be looking at some very important features of WPA 1972, because in environment, WPA is the very backbone of the wildlife governance in India. Okay. So this whole Wildlife Protection Act was brought by 42nd Amendment Act 1970, when the forest protection of wildlife, birds and forest was transferred from state list to concurrent list through 42nd Amendment Act. A very important point for prelims. कि 42nd Amendment Act 1976 transferred the protection of wildlife, forests and birds from state list to concurrent list. ठीक है. Now we'll look at the structure of the governance in India. ठीक है, forest governance. MOEFCC, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change is the nodal ministry at central level. It appoints Director of Wildlife Preservation, ठीक है, at the central level, and every state government appoints its own Chief Wildlife Warden, ठीक है. This Chief Wildlife Warden is responsible for all kind of monitoring of, like, it's a kind of Chief Secretary for Department of Forest in the state government, ठीक है. And every and at every district level there's a wildlife warden, ठीक है. So every district has a wildlife warden who reports to chief wildlife warden, who is at the state government level, a secretary kind of, ठीक है. So this is the structure. Now schedules under WPA 1972, these are very important. This is the most important part of this whole WPA, Wildlife Protection Act 1972. What are the various schedules and how these schedules have been made, ठीक है. The schedule 1, 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. So there are 6 schedules in total. And under WPA 1972 there are 6 schedules. Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now schedule 5 is related to vermins, ठीक है. Vermins are those animals who can be killed because they are causing loss of property, loss of crop and standing crops and all. Once an animal has been declared verming, so its killing does not invite any kind of penal offences. But one of the very important thing that need to remember is that WPA is regarding the wildlife. It is not about the tamed animals. Okay, so cow will not be under any of the schedule. Okay. Similarly, because cow is a tamed animal. Okay. So, but schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now schedule 5 is related to vermin. Schedule 6 is related to specific kind of plants. Okay? Schedule 6 is related to specific kind of plants. Such plants which are put in schedule 6 cannot be grown or cannot be produced without the permission of the government. ठीक है. तो schedule 6 हो गया plants के regarding. Schedule 5 हो गया vermins के regarding. Schedule 3 and 4, 2 and 1. Now this is a pyramid which shows 1, 2, 3 and 4 तक का pyramid shows the level of protection provided. ठीक है. The highest level of protection provided to schedule 1, उसके बाद schedule 2, उसके बाद schedule 3 and 4. तो schedule sorry. ओके तो शेड्यूल 1 में कौन कौन से एनिमल्स हैं. तो शेड्यूल 1 के लिए सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट, द फर्स्ट वन इज दोज एनिमल्स विच आर एंडेंजर्ड. ठीक है, विच आर एंडेंजर्ड and have a high threat perception. Okay, the first is which are endangered and have a very high threat perception. The second point is they cannot be killed, can't be hunted. They can't be hunted except on the grounds that they have become a threat to human life. In such case also, chief wildlife warden of the state needs to write, needs that the recommendation of chief wildlife warden is required to hunt that specific animal which has become a threat to the life. ठीक है. Such animals have been put under schedule 1. Okay, and one important point is they can be killed in self-defense. ठीक है, they can be killed in self-defense and in good faith. Okay, तो ये हो गया शेड्यूल 1 के लिए. अब शेड्यूल 1 ये है, तो शेड्यूल 2 क्या है? शेड्यूल 2 also consists those animals which are endangered. ठीक है. But very important point of difference between schedule 1 and schedule 2 is they can also be not hunted. They can't be hunted. Okay, they also can be hunted, except on the ground that they have either become a threat to human life, or they have either become a threat to human life or threat to property. Property includes standing crop. ठीक है, standing crop. So there's the point of difference between schedule 1 and schedule 2 is कि schedule 1 animal can only be killed either in self defense or if that has become a threat to human life. No other ground can be. Oh, another ground is that either the animal has become diseased beyond recovery. ठीक है, in all the schedules, if an animal has become diseased beyond recovery, it can be killed, of course with the permission of chief wildlife warden. Chief wildlife warden is at the state level. ठीक है, तो but schedule 2 में क्या difference है कि they have either become a threat to human life or they have become a threat to property including standing crops. अगर कोई जानवर जो कि शेड्यूल 2 में है एंड इट इज ईटिंग अप ऑल द क्रॉप, ठीक है, इट इज डिस्ट्रॉइंग ऑल द क्रॉप्स, तो इट कैन बी किल्ड, बट ऑफ कोर्स आफ्टर द परमिशन ऑफ चीफ वाइल्ड लाइफ वार्डन. ओके, शेड्यूल 3 and 4, now schedule 3 and 4, they are not endangered animals. These animals are not endangered, ठीक है, but they have been provided with the security. ठीक है, they cannot be hunted without the permission of chief wildlife warden. Okay. So I hope you understood what are the various schedules and what was the difference. These were the schedules. This is very important. This is the most important slide about the Wildlife Protection Act, because there is a question about, always there's a question about schedule 1 animal, schedule 2 animal, what is the difference between schedule 1 and schedule 2. ठीक है, so second point about Wildlife Protection Act is it provides for certain kind of protected areas. ठीक है, तो there are two kind of protected areas, primarily sanctuaries and national parks. तो sanctuaries and national park में difference, अब like schedules में जो difference है बहुत minute, similar kind of difference exists between sanctuaries and national park. तो इनके बारे में सबसे पहला important point that we need to note is कि sanctuaries and national parks are declared by state government. ठीक है, state government issues a notification that we want to declare a certain kind of area, ठीक है, as a sanctuary or a national park. Once the state government has notified that this area will be a sanctuary or a national park, the state government does not have the power to decrease the limit of that national park. Okay, the state government does not have the power to decrease the limit of that national park. It can do so only by consulting National Board of Wildlife, NBL, which is under the Ministry of Forest, Environment and Climate Change. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया स्टेट गवर्नमेंट, और ये दोनों के बीच में कॉमन पॉइंट है कि इट कैन ओनली बी डिक्लेयर्ड बाय स्टेट गवर्नमेंट. Now sanctuaries and national park, the common point was both will be declared by the state government and not the central government. Now sanctuaries have slightly lower degree of protection, ठीक है, lower degree of protection as compared to national parks. That is, sanctuaries में grazing of livestock can be allowed. ठीक है, sanctuaries में grazing of livestock can be allowed, but national parks में grazing cannot be allowed. Okay, grazing not allowed. This is the primary difference between sanctuary and national park. Otherwise, they are more or same. Okay. Now, it also provides for conservation reserves and community reserves. Okay. So, what are these? Conservation reserve and community reserve. Conservation reserve is any area owned by the any land owned by the state government. यहाँ पे क्या important point है? Land owned by state government can be declared as a community reserve, conservation reserve after the what? After the consultation of local community. Sorry. That is, conservation reserve is any land that is owned by the state government can be declared as a conservation reserve after the consultation with the local community. Specifically, such areas are declared around sanctuaries or national parks or areas connecting two different what? Sanctuaries or national parks. Sanctuaries or national park, sanctuary. Connecting regions can also be declared conservation reserve. So I hope you understood this. What is now, if that is conservation reserve, what is a community reserve? A community reserve, when an individual, ठीक है? When an individual or a community, ठीक है? When an individual or community voluntarily, here state is, the land is owned by the state. Here the land is owned by either the individual or the community, and they voluntarily want to preserve the local ecosystem, then they can, that area can also be declared a community reserve. Okay? But one condition, that it should not be a reserve forest. Now, what is reserve forest? Reserve forest is mentioned under Indian Forest Act 1927. Reserve forest is any kind of forest that the state owns, that the state government has put restrictions upon into entering or grazing or any kind of thing. Okay? The state government can declare any forest as reserve forest, and if a forest is declared reserve forest under IFA 1927, then any kind of access, logging, like picking fruits and any kind of grazing, that will be restricted by the state government. Okay? So I hope you understood what are different kind of protected areas within WPA 1972. Okay. Now, what does this bill propose? What other changes does this bill propose? It proposes the reduction of schedules from 6 to 4. Okay? It proposes the reduction of schedules from 6 to 4. It proposes reduction of schedule from 6 to 4, where the section of vermins has been removed. Vermins have been removed. Basically, the objective and the reasons of this bill state that this bill is being implemented to implement the CITES. Okay? Convention on Trade in Endangered Species. Okay? CITES is an international convention. Okay? It is a convention which India is a party of. Every country that is a party to CITES has to follow certain rules. Okay? But CITES does not take place of the domestic law. It acts as a guiding framework for the domestic law. Okay? So, since India is a party to CITES, it has an obligation to implement the CITES in its own domestic laws. Okay? To implement CITES, what government is doing? Government is bringing this Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill 2021. So what it does is, the first point, it reduces section from 6 to 4. उसमें section schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. ठीक है? Schedule 5 was about vermin, schedule 6 was about plants. So what, or schedule 1 to 4 were about animals. ठीक है? So now what government has done? Schedule 1 and 2 will be about animals. Schedule 3 will be about plants. and Schedule 4 will be about site specimen. Site specimen. Okay, site specimen. मतलब all those plants and animals which have been mentioned under the sites. ठीक है. Now, another point is implementation of sites by constituting a management authority and a scientific authority. The Act also provides for constitution of two authorities. The first one is management authority and the second one is scientific authority. Management authority will be that authority. It is mentioned, these two authorities are mentioned under sites. ठीक है. तो अब sites को implement करने के लिए government is trying to include this in Wildlife Protection Act. ठीक है. तो क्या कर रहे हैं? Management authority will be that authority which will provide license to trade in animals. ठीक है. Trade in live and captive animals. Or, and what will scientific authority do? Scientific authority will advise the government on the impact of that trade on that specific animal. ठीक है. Like python का trading होता है. Python is traded for its skin and wallets, sandals, leather bags of snake skin are made from it. तो मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी क्या करेगी? मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी विल प्रोवाइड लाइसेंस टू पीपल हु आर ट्रेडिंग इन पाइथन. ठीक है. एंड साइंटिफिक अथॉरिटी क्या करेगी? इट विल प्रोवाइड गाइडेंस ऑन टू गवर्नमेंट on what kind of impact that specific trade is having on the existence of that specific animal. ठीक है. Now the third point is central government can now regulate or prohibit trade of invasive alien species. This was not present in the earlier Wildlife Protection Act. Now it has been added that any invasive alien species, the transboundary movement can be regulated. Okay. Prohibit the trade, not only trade but also growing of such species. Conservation reserves can now be declared by central government as well. Okay. Now conservation reserves, as we saw, what is conservation reserve? So earlier what happened was state government owning any land can declare that as a conservation reserve. Now if central government owns any land, it can also declare that land as a conservation reserve. These are the kind of changes that this act, that this amendment bill tries to bring. I hope you understood this. If there's any doubt, kindly ask me that in comment section.